On today's network, there are many reasons for traffic analysis that include troubleshooting, network problems, intrusions detection, and forensics. And to gain a better understanding of protocols, Wireshark is a powerful packet analysis tool where you can capture, display, and filter traffic live from a network interface. Network administrators, developers, security analysts, students, and building automation control specialists can all benefit from using Wireshark. Network administrators have long used Wireshark to monitor network traffic, to resolve bottleneck issues, and it can help to build you firewall rules. A new player with Wireshark are developers. Developers can benefit from understanding protocols and application behavior. They can see how the routines behave and see if the application works they was anticipated. They can also determine if it's the application or the network that causing slow response times. Security professionals find that Wireshark is valuable resource. For example, if they suspect malicious activity, they can look at the conversations and see if there's a strange port number. They can then do a Google search and determine what program uses that port and determine whether it's malicious or not. Using Wireshark can help students to better understand many of the common protocols used on a network today. They can then study the behavior of protocol. We will all familiar with the 4 packet exchange in the DHCP process, but if you drop it into Wireshark, we can actually see the exchange of the discover, offer, request, and acknowledge. And then we can drill down in each individual packet to see what is happening. With the proliferation and expansion of smart buildings, controls technicians will find packet analysis invaluable as they can monitor traffic used for building automation using PACnet or Loanworks. For example, we see here PACnet stack services, and in this exchange, the control technicians might bring up a flow graph, and here we can make sure that we are communicating with the correct host. The technician can then possibly follow either a UDP or TCP stream to see if the correct commands are at play. Wireshark is a free protocol analysis tool. It's rich in features and it used to examine traffic either live from a wired or wireless connection or by using pre-captured packets. We can analyze network problems, detect network misuse, perform regulatory compliance through content monitoring, the parameter and endpoint traffic. We can monitor bandwidth usage per application and processes, and we can verify endpoint security status to see if there are any unwanted protocols such as SSDP traffic and multicast DNS, and we can gather and report network statistics. So now you are ready to download and install Wireshark. Head on over to the wireshark.org page where you'll see this screen. Now here I will just click on this download. Get started now. First we will see this stable release, which is what I have selected and I already downloaded. Within this section you can see the Windows installer for 64 bits and also 32 bits. But then there is also one for Mac OS and others. Now what's important is that you'll want to keep the most recent release on your machine. Now why is that? Well, people submit bugs to developers all the time and they then do their best to fix as many issues as possible. So when you get an update, you will get a release with certain functions that have been enhanced and also bugs that have been fixed. Now you can also select old stable version here as well, which is of course an older version. Now here I will just click on this downloads page. It look a lot like what we just saw, but now let's take a look at bit further down. Now you can see there are a lot of options here. What really great is that Wireshark can be installed on a number of different platforms, including Arch Linux, Novell, Red Hat, and a lot other. And why? Well, a lot vendors are incorporating Wireshark right into their devices. So now let's just click on this Windows installer 64-bit. So, and if you have any other operating system, you can just select that one. Now I already downloaded the Windows installer 64-bit. So now once you open the setup, you'll see this screen. So here I'll just click on next, and you'll also see this stuff here, and you can just read this if you want, but I'll just click on note it. And then here is the next page where it says to choose the component, and we will drop this down, and you can see some of the plugins and extensions, some of the tools, documentation, T-Shark and Wireshark. Now in most cases you will want to keep all of these, including the plugins and extension, and that's really kind of important because that's how the decodes work. The dissector plugins is what gives Wireshark the ability to present the protocols. You will also see T-Shark now. T-Shark is lightweight command line interface where if you need to do a large capture, this might be your choice because there is no graphical user interface. It's nice lightweight program. You can do your capture and then bring it into Wireshark for analysis. So I'll again just click on next, and here you'll see all your shortcuts. You want shortcut in the start menu and stuff like that. You can just check mark this or uncheck this. I'll just go next. Next you can select your destination folder. I'll just go with default and again click on next. Now if you have already installed npcap, then you don't have to install this, but if you have not installed this, you have to install this because this is used for to capture the packet. Okay, so I'll just click on next because I want to install this, and if you don't want, just uncheck this, but make sure you have this installed in your machine. So I'll check this and again click on next. Now again for USB debugging, you can use this USB PCAP. So again I'll just check this and install this as well, and now I'll just click on install, and it will run through, and again it may prompt you to do a reboot, but once you are done you can bring up Wireshark and then you will see the spark lines, and then you can start capturing traffic. So now let's take a look at the Wireshark interface. Now when you look at this next generation, you look at it and it seems as if there's not as much going on, and yes, it is a streamlined interface, but there's pretty much everything you need in order to start capturing traffic. Now up at the top you still can see some of the different things as far as menu choices, and some of the icons are available. If they are dimmed out, it's simply because there is no packet to work with those icons, so they are not available. Here you can put in a display filter, in which again you can do once the capture begins or with the pre-capture packet, and then down below it says open. Now once you open a packet capture or save it, it will remain on that open, and then you can take a look and quickly reference it. Now down below is where you see the capture and some of options. Now what these are called are spark lines, and that lets us know that we have an active connection and it's exchanging data. Below capture it says use this filter. Now you could put a capture filter in there. I usually don't because it limits you to only what you are filtering and you miss everything else, but you could if you want to put a filter there. And next here you see is that all interface shown. So if I click on this and if I just unselect this external capture, you'll see it will remove USB PCAP, and if I just select this, it will again show this stuff here as well. And one more thing you can see with Ethernet, you can see nothing is happening here because right now we have wireless connection, we don't have connected any Ethernet cable, so there is nothing here. Down below this you can learn more about the Wireshark. You can see this wiki, you can ask question and answer, and you can also see the guide here. Now let's take a look at the USB cap. So again we'll click here and you'll see all the devices here, and here in the USB input device I will just select this mouse and I'll just click on start and yes. Now this is great if you are troubleshooting and want to know what exactly happening during the connection. Now again I will just stop this and I will close this, and now again we are here in the Wireshark interface. Now If you want to do little bit more, and if you go to this capture option and options here you will see three options: input, output and option. And down below you will see enable promiscuous mode on all interface, and make sure this is check mark. And again you will see this capture filter for selected interfaces. Again you will see all this capture filter here. But let's take a look at output. Now here we can capture to a permanent file, and we ask how would you like this, and the PCAP next generation is generally what I leave it as. But remember that Wireshark only going to be putting it in a temporary file until you save it. Now if you want to capture for any length of time, one thing you probably should do is drop it into a ring buffer, and this would occur right here. Use a ring buffer after how many files. For example, if you are letting a capture run and you put a specific coloring rule in order to look for something on a network, you could just keep dropping it into a ring buffer and it will overwrite those files over and over again. Then we go to the options, and here we can see some of the display option and update list of packet in real time, and I generally select that and automatically scroll during live capture. Now the name resolution, this is where it's going to do a resolution of one of the three things. Resolve the MAC address, it does not hurt to do that. That would give us the manufacturer name, and that just simply comes from a file. Resolve transport names, I do that too because then it will tell us what application it thinks it's associated with. The resolve network names, I generally don't select that, and that's really because if I did select it, it would be hitting the DNS server a lot and it would cause a lot more traffic. And then down below, stop capture automatically after how much. You would say maybe after so many packet or how much of a capture you want, and you can then begin your capture. So the Wireshark interface looks a little different, but as we see, it does the same thing as legacy and provide us everything we need in order to begin capturing packets. Now I am here at the Wireshark interface. Let's take a look at down below. Here you can see the user guides, wiki, question and answer and mailing list. All are hyperlinks, and we will go to these in just a second. But before that, if we just move here at the top, you will see this help. If I just click on this and I just move to the content, you can also use the shortcut F1 for that. Okay, we'll open this in the Firefox. Now here you will see the list of contents guide. For example, if you want to learn about something, let's say I want to learn about this capture menu. I will just select this. Here you will see the full guide about the capture menu. You can learn lots of things here. And if we just move to the statistic menu, you'll see all the stuff here as well. You will also see the capture file properties, statistic menu items and stuff like that. You will learn a lot of stuff here. So next, if I just click here, next thing here you'll see is wiki about the Wireshark. So if I go to this wiki, again this is the hyperlink and it will move us to this website here. You'll see the complete wiki about the Wireshark here. You'll see information about how to edit the Wireshark wiki. You'll see lots of stuff here. You'll learn about T-Shark and other stuff here as well. So again, move out from here. The next thing here you'll see is questions and answer. So if you want to ask any question in the community, just go to the question and answer link, and here you can ask your question and the community will answer, and you can also answer someone else's questions. Okay, you'll see if I just open any one of these, let's say I just how to know which interface I connected. If I just click on this, you can see this is asked by someone So you can add your answer here, and you can also ask any question here, and someone else in the community will answer the question. You can see ask your question. After that, the last option here you will see is this mailing list. So if I just click on this mailing list here, you'll see all this mailing list here. You will also see this for history enthusiasts. You will learn about the Wireshark history and stuff like that. Effective packet analysis begins with tapping into the network at the proper location to gather traffic for analysis. Tapping into the data stream and what you will see will depend on the network. In today's network, there are two types of Ethernet environments: shared or hub-based, or on a switch. If you are on a wireless network, you will go through an access point which is acting like a hub where we can see all the traffic. If tapping into a wired network, you will most likely go through a switch, and then you will see only your own traffic. If you want to see all the traffic, we have choices. We can use port mirroring or span, which is switch port analysis. We can also monitor directly on the device, as a lot of vendors are putting Wireshark right within their device, so you can monitor the traffic in real time. You can also use a full duplex tab in line with traffic, and you will most likely need a special adapter. When you launch Wireshark, a welcome screen displays the list of available network connections on your current device. After you choose an interface and begin the capture, the interface gathers up network traffic. All packet analysis tools work in the same way. They gather the traffic, they decode it or break it down, and then display it in human readable format. The first step is to gather the traffic, and before you do this, you will need the correct capture engine. For example, if you are using Windows, you will be prompted to use npcap, and in Linux we use libpcap. If you don't have the correct capture engine, you won't be able to capture the traffic. Keep in mind that traffic enters the network interface card one frame at a time. Packet analysis software converts those bits into readable form for analysis. The heart of this is where the decodings take place. Wireshark was ethereal before 2006, but the main core is still the same. The Ethereal Packet Analyzer, or EPAN, is the packet analyzing engine for Wireshark. Within EPAN, we see that it goes through various stages. The protocol tree dissectors, any necessary dissector plugins, and any display filters. Wireshark and many other packet analysis tools provide option to enhance your graphical experience and will display the traffic in a readable format. I am here with this packet capture, and let's take a look at the interface. When you see a capture, we see that it defaults with the three panel. The first panel is the packet list. The packet list pane is at the top of the window, and it shows all the packet found in the active capture file. Up at the top, we see columns which we can modify. We can make them larger or make them smaller, and I can also add those very easily by right clicking. And for example, if I would like to see version, I'll just check this mark and you'll see this version here. Now keep in mind that every one will have slightly different column headers and choices for column headers. It really depends on how you customize those headers. I would take that off by going back in and unchecking that. But I can also add a column value by going directly into field value. So for example, if I just move into the Internet Protocol version, and here in the total length, if I just right click and then just click the apply as column, you'll see it will be applied here as a column, and I can just take this off as well. Up here in the packet list over on the right hand side is called intelligent scroll bar. Now using the color scrolls, I can easily and quickly go to the trouble spots. For example, I see this black area here and I'll just click on it and it will take me to the trouble spots. In the center are what's called the packet detail, and this is where you can see all the protocols and the field value of those protocols. As they are dissected, we can do the same thing if we want to and pop it out in a single window. Let's do that. I'll go up at the top here and I will click on the frame 73. Now if we take a look at this is helpful. For example, if I wanted to display this up on a screen, and in training we can go through each of these field values. Now down below is the packet byte, and this is actually what we call the xdump, and this is the raw data. It is an hexadecimal, but I could make it in bytes. I can right click and say show us in the bytes, so as a bytes, but there is a lot of information, so I will go back in and I'll just click on show byte as a hexadecimal. Now again you see this layout here, and if you want to change this layout, what we are going to do is we'll go to the edit and we'll go to the preferences, and here in the preferences you will see layout option. If I just click on this, you see we have selected this layout right now, and if I want to change this layout, I will just select another one and I'll click OK. Now you can see the layout is changed, and again if I want to change the layout, again we can go to another layout. We can select other layout here as well, but I will just select the default one and OK. Effective packet analysis goes through several phases. First, we need to tap in at the correct location. Wireshark then gathers the traffic, but you will need the correct capture engine in order to do this. Wireshark then decodes the packet using ethereal packet analysis, which is the core engine for Wireshark. It then displays the capture in a readable format for analysis. While you are working with Wireshark, you can use capture and display filters. A capture filter is applied prior to capture and will only capture what you filter, nothing else. A display filter is used during an active capture or even on a pre-captured packet. One important thing to know is that they are different, and also when you are working with display filters, there are shortcuts for those display filters where you can simply right click, and I will do that during demonstration and show you how to easily get and apply a filter. So let's take a look at the interface here, and I want to just show you one important thing, and why they are different is because this comes from the capture engine and the display filters is within the Wireshark and dissectors and the decode. So if I go up to the display filter, and well, say for example I want to just display FTP traffic, and it does come up with some choices, but if it is just FTP, I will leave it at that. Now while I was typing that, I think you noticed something. It's red. Now what happens in Wireshark is it's trying to help you. If it's red, it means it won't work. Green means it's good, and yellow means go ahead and try it. It might work, it might not work. And the other thing is, when I start typing, if I were to type a capital FTP, it won't work. It never has, and it may work at some point, but at this point a capital letter on the left hand side won't work. Now I can type FTP and just select that, and I would be able to capture FTP data. But while I am using it in a display filter, I will also capture other types of traffic. Alright, so I will take that off, and I want to just show you something down below here. Well, we will say for example, if I am only interested in capturing FTP traffic, nothing else. Alright, let's just type FTP. Alright, and it does not work. Well, again, that's because they are different. Now on this little green icon here, let's just click on it. I just want to show you that there are some samples in here that you can use in order for you to create a capture filter. Now if we look at the way it's structured, you can see that there are different protocols, different ports. What I'm going to show you is I am going to type TCP and still does not like it. So let's type TCP port 21. Now that's an FTP port. Alright, so as you can see, I simply put port 21, which is associated with FTP. And now I will go to an open FTP site just so we can see what we get when we capture that traffic. And first of all, I will double click on this Wi-Fi and begin capturing. So let's go to any FTP site. And now if I just move to my Wireshark and I will stop this here. Alright, so now you can see all I have is FTP traffic. The traffic is no longer coming in, and now we take a look, there's nothing else. So if I need to do some troubleshooting, let's see. I will go to statistic and a flow graph. There is the FTP traffic, nothing else. So I will just close this stuff here, and we will also close this and continue without saving. And I'm going to take that off, so you really don't want to keep that capture filter on there, because it's not going to do us any good, because it will limit anything else I try to capture. Once you have cleared out the capture filter, you might also want to reboot just to get out any remaining filters in your interface, so that does not disrupt when you are going to do moving forward. So I want to open up a TCP example, and once I open this up, we'll just do a couple of things with the display filter. And this is where again you will take a look at apply the display filter. Now there are lots of things that we can do as far as providing a display, and I will just type TCP, and again it's turning green, so that means it's okay, and we'll see a lot of traffic in there. But within the Wireshark there are a lot of very nice shortcuts that I can do in order for me to create a filter. For example, if I just come down here, and here in the transmission control protocol, for example, if I want to see that all the frame which have sequence number 0, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll just first of all I'll just close this filter, and now here what I'm going to do is I'll just select this sequence number 0. I will right click on it and I'll just select prepare as a filter, and I will click on select it, and it will put this here, but it will not run this. If I just click on enter, now it will run. You will see couple of different frames which have sequence number 0, and again to remove this filter you can just click on this close icon. And if I want to see sequence number raw, then I will right click on this, but this time instead of prepare as a filter, I'll just select apply as a filter, and again I'll just click on select. It will apply this as a filter. Again I will just remove this filter, and then you can do some other thing as far as expression. For example, if I just move to the Internet Protocol version, and this time here if I want to know that if the header identification number is this one 21555, I will just right click on this and again select apply as filter, and I'll select this, and it will show me this one frame here. We can also use operator here. For example, if The identification number is this one, and I can also use operators here. For example, if I just right click on this version and I want to show that thing here, if the version is 4 as well, for example, I'll just select this apply as filter, and here you will see lots of operator, and operator, or operator, and not operator, or not operator. And if I just select or operator, if any one of these filter true, they will show that data here. You can see this one. And again, if I just remove this, we can do this something like this as well. If the identification number is for the header is this one, and also the version is 4, only show that one. This will show this one only here. So there are lots of different shortcuts that you can use, and in addition you can create an expression by going to analyze, display filter expression, and here you can build your own expression. Make sure you know what you are doing. So I'll close this, and now I have given you just the highlights to show you that we can filter on many different field values, either by using a capture filter which only limits us to whatever I filter on, or better yet, use the display filter, allow the capture to occur and display only the traffic you want to see. In addition to understanding what the protocols do, a solid understanding of the OSI model and the encapsulation process is important to do effective packet analysis. The 7-layer OSI model standardizes the function of data transformation by breaking it down into layers, and it outlines how that network interface card encapsulates the data as it's prepared for transit on the network. I will take a look at the OSI model at a high level. I will review each layer and I will describe the main function. We will talk about some common protocols in that layer and state the protocol data unit, which defines the shape of the data that it's in that layer, and we will talk about any addresses that are needed, such as MAC address or IP address. Let's start with the application layer. Application layer is layer 7, and this is all about initiating contact with the network. Usually a user who would initiate perhaps getting a web page. The protocols that are used are HTTP, FTP, or SMTP. The protocol data unit at this layer is simply data. Nothing magical has happened. It's just simply data, and there is no addresses that are needed. The presentation layer will take the next step. It will format the data. It provides optional compression and encryption, and the protocol data unit at this point is simply data. Layer 5 is the session layer. This is all about initiating, maintaining, and tearing down a session. Again, the protocol data unit at this point is simply data. Now, when we go to the transport layer, this is where we start the encapsulation process. The transport layer is responsible for transporting data. Depending on how you need it transported, you might choose a connection-oriented protocol such as TCP or connection-less protocols such as UDP. The protocol data unit at this point is a segment, and at this point we need a port address. We need the source and destination port address, which will logically associate with an appropriate application. The layer 3 is the network layer. This is all about the network. We provide addressing and routing, and when we talk about the different protocols that are in this layer, we know of course there is IP, and of course we also need ICMP. But let's take a look at that protocol that I put right in between layer 3 and layer 2, which is address resolution protocol. Now, address resolution protocol is a unique protocol, and that there is no IP header, and that because it's where it needs to be. There is no routing involved. It's simply resolving an IP address to a MAC address. The protocol data unit at this point is a packet, and the address is an IP address. Layer 2 or the data link layer is all about the proper frame formation. The protocol is Ethernet 2, which is the most widely used protocol on the local area network, and the protocol data unit at this point is a frame, and the address is a MAC address. Now it's all ready and packaged up. It's encapsulated with proper frame formation, and it has all the necessary addresses. It then is broken down into a stream of bits, so it's able to be transmitted on whatever media you need it to be transmitted on. There are no addresses and no protocols involved. Again, it's just sending it off on a stream of bytes. So if you aren't already familiar with the OSI model, get a better understanding of each of the layer of the OSI model. What it does, the protocol data units and the addresses, all in all, these skills will help you to analyze traffic better. Now that you understand the different layers, let's build out a frame. Now when frame formation occurs and the encapsulation processes take place, we start out with a stamp of data. Well, the data might be a web request. The next thing that happens is we create a segment, and that would either be your TCP or UDP header. And within that segment, we have the source and destination port address. Next part of encapsulation is adding the IP header. Now at the network layer, it's called a packet, and within that we have a source and destination IP address. The last part of this frame formation is the frame header, and within that, of course, we have the MAC address. And with the frame, not only is there a header, we also have a trailer. That is the frame check sequence. This is to provide error detection on a network by creating a cyclic redundancy check value that the network will check as it's traveling along its way. Now, if we look at that frame formation and the encapsulation process, we can relate it to how it's presented to us in Wireshark. So take a look at this encapsulation, and all the way at the top is of course your frame header. Frame is Ethernet 2, and you see the source and destination MAC addresses within that frame header. The next represents the network layer in the form of a packet, and there you see the IP header, and of course within that would be your source and destination IP address. And then we move to the transport layer, where you see a segment. In this case, it's transmission control protocol, and there you have the source and the destination ports. Tucked within that frame is the data, and here we see HTTP, and it might be a web request. Keep in mind, not all frames have data. This is an example of fully encapsulated frame, just to show you how it relates in Wireshark to the OSI model. So it's important to understand the OSI model because the encapsulation process is evident in Wireshark, and understanding each of the layers, the protocol data unit and the addressing, will help you to analyze traffic better. The TCP IP suite or Internet suite is a set of protocols that allows us to communicate and exchange data on the network. The suite defines how data is packetized, addressed, transmitted, and routed. The key protocols are TCP, UDP, IP, and ICMP. We see the TCP IP suite residing here at the network and transport layer. At the network layer, the main players are IP and ICMP. IP, or the Internet Protocol, is the network layer protocol used for routing the data from the source to the destination. IP is responsible for addressing and does not have any error reporting functions. For that, we use ICMP. This is used in addition to the Internet Protocol to carry error, routing, and control messages. However, it does not exchange any data between systems. The transport layer provides data transport by using either TCP, which is a connection-oriented protocol, or UDP, which is connectionless. You will hear that other protocols ride on the top of the TCP IP suite, and those would be protocols such as those in the application layer, HTTP, FTP, or SMTP. and we need to set in our bindings the ability to use TCP IP as pictured here in this graphic. The TCP IP suite or the internet suite is a set of protocols that allows us to communicate and exchange data on the network. Transmission Control Protocol resides at layer 4 or the transport layer of the OSI model. Transmission Control Protocol provides connection-oriented transport. TCP begins with three-way handshake and data is sequenced and acknowledged. TCP supports windowing and flow control so as not to overwhelm the host with the TCP header. And now we will go into Wireshark and take a look at those field values. Now if you want to follow along with me, you can just go to the Wireshark Wirecloud http.com and just simply download this. Just click on export and click on download and bring this into the Wireshark. Now first of all, here what I am going to do is, you will see three panels here. Now what I'm going to do is I will go to view and I will just uncheck this packet pipes because I want more landscape here. Okay, so I will hide this and then simply I will just click on frame 4. Now let's just take a look at our encapsulation. Frame 4 is simply metadata about that frame. Here is the frame header, Ethernet 2, the network layer header IP, the transport layer header TCP, and then the data HTTP. We are going to open the TCP. Now we can take a look. I will float this on top so you can refer to the TCP header. Alright, first we see the source and destination port. The source port is 57678. Now sent from the client. That's simply saying when you come back, send the data to 57678. The destination port is 80, which is associated with HTTP. Here we see stream index 0. There are no field value stream index. That's the value calculated by Wireshark. This helps you to keep track of the many different streams in Wireshark. And if we were to look at conversation, we could go to stream index 0 or stream 14 or whatever you would like. Here we see TCP segment length 134. Now where did that value come from? If I just scroll down here and I will just place my cursor on top of this HTTP header, and here you see 134 bit. Again, that's just a number calculated in Wireshark. Now here we see sequence number 1 and its relative sequence number. What that means, it is in relation to this stream sequence number 1. It's not the actual value. If it were, it's large number. Let's take a look. I will right click on this and I will go to the protocol reference. And here we can uncheck relative sequence number. And as you see, it's a large number. It's very hard to calculate values with that large number. So we'll go back to relative sequence number by going to the protocol references and we will check this relative sequence number and then we will put relative sequence number back. For example, it says next sequence number 135. Well, that's 134 plus 1 and that's what the calculated as what coming next. Here you see the acknowledgement number 1 and again it's relative acknowledgement number. And now here is the header length 32 bytes. Normally a TCP header will be about 20 bytes. Now when we add option, that adds to length. Now let's take a look at the flag section. Now there's a lot going on with the flags. When you are ready to go a little more advanced, you can find out about all the flags, and why we keep track of those is certainly your devices are monitoring what's happening during the conversation. The flags tell the story about what's going on at that point in time. Now some common ones that you will see, of course, is the SYN flag, and that's going to synchronize the sequence number. We see acknowledgement, and that's of course acknowledging the data push. And the FIN flag is when the conversation is over, we exchange FIN packet. And reset is when it's set. It means I don't want to talk to you and the conversation has reset or closed. So a lot goes on with flags, and it would be good to get familiar with those as you advance, because it tells a lot about the story and it is used for a number of different reasons. Next, right now we will go to the window size. Now window size, it says 46, but then there's a value here in bracket, it says calculated window size. That's larger number. Well, that's because the actual value is pretty small, and in the 80s the window size of 46 would maybe a normal, but as you see there's a scaling factor of 128, which give us the true value of 588.8. That's so the server knows about how much data I can send to the host without overwhelming the host. It will update if the value goes up or down. For example, if the host buffer were to get too full, the number would shrink, and as it processes the data, the number would then expand. Now we will look at the checksum. It says unverified. Well, in a lot of cases you will find that we are not going to try to validate that checksum, and here's why. Now take a look down below. There's a blue dot, cyan dot, and that's the expert system. Now what is it saying is that it's just chat. Okay, so if this were to be calculated, this might be incorrect, and I will show you why. We'll go to the protocol preferences, and here it says validate TCP checksum if possible. Now I will select that, and now you see it says it's incorrect and it should be this number. And as you see, there is little note that says TCP checksum offload. What happens is it offloads to the NIC card and it comes up incorrect. Down below you see the red dot and the expert system, and that's saying that there is possibly something wrong with this tree, but there isn't. So we'll go back and check that and replace that with validate TCP checksum. So again, we'll go to the protocol preferences and we will click on validate the TCP checksum if possible, and that will correct that. But if the checksum is important to us to use because it's going from source to destination, many things could happen. The checksum in the TCP header monitors for error detection, not correction. Now we will see the urgent pointer, and then down below then what follows as you see over is option and data. Well, now here you see the option, and in this case that option is 12 byte. Now we know that it needs to be a multiple of 4, so let's drop this down and see what inside. Well, you see there is timestamp option, and that's 10 byte, but it has to be 12. So you see no ops, which are kind of placeholder, so that comes up to 12 bits. So that's the TCP header in Wireshark, and we have gone over all of the field values and hopefully have got a little better understanding of TCP. Transmission Control Protocol is a connection-oriented protocol. It begins with a three-way handshake and ends by terminating the session. A three-way handshake begins by the client sending a sync packet to the server. That sync packet synchronizes the sequence numbers. If the server accepts, it responds by synchronization acknowledgement. The client then sends a final acknowledgement, and then we have a connection. A socket is created and we can begin to exchange data. Periodically, services will be refused and then you will see a reset. No response may indicate a firewall. You may receive an ICMP destination unreachable packet, and a code might indicate the network was unreachable or the host was unreachable. But most likely the target port was firewalled. The host might try again with another SYN packet. The connection can be terminated in one of several ways. The connection can time out and will be closed, or no password was sent, so the connection was reset. Or we will see an exchange of FIN packet, and this indicates a normal termination. For normal termination, we simply see an exchange of FIN and FIN ACK packet from the client to the server and the server back to the client, and this will close the connection. So let's step through the handshake and termination. I am here on CloudShark, and you can either follow along in CloudShark or you can go into export and download the file and open this in the FileShark. So I'll go to the FileShark and bring that file there. Now I have opened this capture in Wireshark, and it's almost a perfect example of complete conversation. I'll scroll up here so you can see that it's really a small capture. But let's take a look at flow graph. We'll go to the statistic and we'll go to the flow graph. And there is no need to filter it because its entire conversation is simply with the client to the server. Now let's take a look at the top 3 packet. There you see your 3-way handshake, and then down below you see an exchange of data, and then somewhere in the middle you see quit and closing connections. So we now know it's time to terminate this session, and the last 4 packets are where we close the conversation. So I will close that, and let's take a look at the 3-way handshake. I will scroll up and give us a little more room where we can take a look at the frame 1. So let's just first start with the frame 1. Now when we look at frame 1, we have a frame header, we have the IP header and the TCP header. As you notice, there is no data. There won't be any because it's just a handshake. No data is exchanged. And you can also see here length equal 0. So let's take a look at the TCP header. This indicates what's going on. If we take a look at the flags and drop this down, and here you see the SYN flag set. Again, that's from the client to the server trying to initiate a conversation. Now with that first packet going from the client to the server comes with its some options. If I place my cursor on the TCP header and then look down below, the TCP header is 40 bytes. The TCP header is 20 bytes at least, but with option it's more. Now at this point it's 40 bytes, but let's take a look at the option. Here's your option, and I will drop this down and you can see what it is. Is the client communicating to the server what options would I like to agree upon, and so you understand. For example, the following client is saying that the maximum segment size is 1460 bytes. Also SAC is permitted, and SAC is selective acknowledgement, meaning keep sending the data even if it's not in order. I'll put it in the correct order. Here we see the timestamp and window scaling. Now keep in mind it has to be multiple of 4. Now with each of these, and if you look down below, you can see the size of each of those options. Window scaling is 3 bytes. So we have to add a no op, which is essentially a placeholder to bring that total up to 20 bytes. And then that with the TCP header give us our 40 bytes. The server then responds with the sync acknowledgement. And I will scroll down here, and here you can see the acknowledgement flag. If I just move to the flags, and you can see the acknowledgement flag and the sync flag. Now keep in mind that sync flag is set only on the first 2 packets of 3-way handshake. After that you won't see again in that conversation. Now we will bring this up and take a look at the TCP header, and again it's 40 bytes because the server is sending the server option, and as you can see those are the following option the server sent to the client. Then we go to the frame 3, and that's our final step in this. And let's take a look at the flags here. Now we see that the acknowledgement flag is set, and that means the conversation is ready to begin. After this we can start to exchange data. In this point you can see the TCP header is dropped to 32 bytes because there are few less options, as you can see down below. Now we'll bring this back, and now we'll take a look at the end of the conversation down below. We'll go to the frame 12. And here's where you see the exchange of data from the client to the server. Now it's seeing an acknowledgement, and that acknowledgement is probably at the end of the conversation, where the client is saying that it's acknowledging that it's received whatever data it's received from the server. The server respond with fin acknowledgement saying, I am pretty much done with everything, we can close this connection. Then the client respond again with the fin acknowledgement, and then we see our final acknowledgement, and that will then close the connection and terminate the session. So as you can see, TCP is a connection oriented protocol where you will see a three-way handshake and a teardown of the session. User datagram protocol is a connectionless protocol for data transfer. We see here in the OSI model, UDP is in the transport layer. UDP is a lightweight protocol. It provides connectionless transport layer service, and there is no handshake or connection process. UDP does not have any ordering or reliability services, and there is no teardown. UDP is a lightweight protocol that's great for time-sensitive applications such as DNS, voice over IP, routing information protocol, or trivial file transfer protocol. Here we see the UDP header. It's always 8 bytes long, and it includes the source port, destination port, length, and checksum. Now that checksum is used for error detection, not correction. The UDP checksum is optional with IP version 4. However, it is mandatory with IP version 6 primarily because IP version 6 does not have a checksum. Now let's take a look at the UDP header. I am at the CloudShark, and if you would like to follow along, you can just simply go to this export and download this file and bring it into the Wireshark. Now I have opened it up in the Wireshark, and what I will do up here is go to the display filter and I will type UDP. So there are my DNS packet, and what we will do is just take a look at the user datagram protocol. I will double click and it will pop out this frame, and again this lightweight protocol only has 4 fields: the source port, the destination port, the length, and the checksum, and that's pretty much for the UDP. So while I'm here, let's take a look at some other things in Wireshark. Let's go to the statistics. If we go to the statistics, you can see there are a lot of choices, and for more advanced training we will get into those. But for something really simple, let's just take a look at the capture file properties. Now when you open this tells us a summary about this file. Now you can see the capture and what it knows about the hardware, the operating system. Again, what it knows it will put in there. Here you can see when this packet was captured, 2011, and some more information about the statistic. And now down below here is the next generation. We are able to put comment in the file. Now this would be handy if we were to share this information with coworkers. So for example, I might want to say take a look at frame 29. And I will just say save comment, and then we'll close it. Now if you take a look up here, there is a asterisk that is right by the title. That is because it knows that there is a comment and you will want to save that so someone can reference it when they open it up. Well, we'll go back into the statistic again, and I will drop this down. And another handy tool is protocol hierarchy. Now this is helpful if you are taking a look at the protocols that are traveling on your network, and you might want to see if there's anything that should not be on your network. So this is simple capture, nothing really standing out, but again it's a nice handy tool. I will close that too here. Now there is another thing in this statistic, and that's interesting. I will talk about some of the things with conversation and endpoint. We will take a look at the endpoint. Now remember, the endpoints are the two sides of the conversation. These are the endpoints. If we go into the conversation, here you can see details about the conversation. In this case, we have minimal information. It's very short capture, but if we go into the one conversation and we have a little bit more detail here, I can right click and I can say apply as a filter and select it. And here you have choices whether you want to A to B, B to A, or both ways. And I will say close, and that's put that conversation filter right up there, and it runs it for you so that you can see the whole stream. So really that's all there is about UDP. And again, I wanted to share with you some other things found in Wireshark. So UDP is a connectionless protocol for data transfer. The Internet Protocol resides at the network layer of the OSI model. For this segment, we will focus on IP version 4. The Internet Protocol is responsible for addressing and routing its connectionless, meaning its best effort. For example, if you were to send a letter general delivery, it will get there, but there is no guarantee. But we can provide quality of service to push the data along a little faster. Here's your IP version 4 header, and as you can see, we have several fields, and at the bottom option and data. Let's take a look at an IP header. I am in the Wireshark and I have expanded one of the frame, and we will take a look at that header. And on the right hand side, you could follow along. Alright, the first field is simply version, and in this case it is version 4. Not much there to show. This tells us the header length, and it is 20 bytes. And I can confirm this if I just put my cursor on top of this Internet Protocol version and then look down here. You can see it's 20 bytes. This field value here is called differentiated services that relate to what called the type of service. Now keep in mind, 0 is best effort. It's not prioritized, but in certain cases we want the data to prioritize and move along a little faster. The total length is header and any data that follows, and here we see 1500. Now the next three fields relate to the fragmentation. Those are identification, flags, and fragment offset. The specification stated that IP was responsible for addressing and fragmentation. Now that was a long time ago, but things have changed. We don't see fragmentation so much anymore. So those three fields you see, the first one is identification. So in the case of fragmented packet, you see a number of different fragments. You will need to identify them to put EM all back together. Then there is the flags, and I'll drop this down. Now you see the first one is the reserved bit, and that's not ever used, and the second one is don't fragment, and sometimes that's 0, but a lot of times it simply says don't fragment me, don't break me apart. Now if we were to fragment, in some cases you will, for example, if you are in the virtual environment and you use jumbo frames, well then you go back out to the regular network and it's a lot smaller and you have to fragment. So in this case you would see more fragment, and that bit would be set. And the last field value is that row is fragment offset, and that identifier would help you to put back the fragments in the correct order, in the correct place. The next field is the time to live value, and that's essentially how many hoops it takes around before it goes to the 0, and if it does not go to 0, then it's no longer going to exist. The time to live value is in order to prevent the packets from going around and never getting to their final destination. Now this, you see the protocol TCP. That protocol field is what follows the IP header, and down below here you see TCP. So that's what the identifies. And then you see the header checksum, and in this case you see the validation is disabled, and we do disable the validation because sometimes it's offloaded and the checksum is incorrect. So it tells you what it is, but it is not checked. And then down below here, this is where you see your source and destination IP address. Then after that you see any data that would follow. So that's the Internet Protocol version 4. Internet Protocol version 6, like Internet Protocol version 4, resides at the network layer of the OSI model. IP version 6 has a number of features, one being a larger address space. IP version 4 had a 32-bit address space. It was represented by a dotted decimal notation. IP version 6 uses 128 bits in the address space and it's represented using hexadecimal notation. IP version 6 supports both stateful and stateless auto configuration. With IP version 6 there is no broadcast. IP version 6 uses multicast to communicate with multiple hosts. IP version 6 has a streamlined header. You will see that there are a lot of fewer field values in IP version 6. There are optional extension headers that you can use with IP version 6, including fragmenting or IP security. IP version 6 is still connectionless and a best effort protocol and requires the use of ICMP version 6 along with it. The main enhancement, as you can see in this illustration, is that IGMP and ARP are not necessary with IP version 6. Let's compare the IP version 4 header with the IP version 6 header. Now we'll take a look at the field value. First, the internet header length does not exist in an IP version 6 header. Those three fields, the identification flag and fragment offset, had to do with fragmentation. IP version 6 seeks not to fragment, so there are no fields that deal with fragmentation. You can fragment, but you will need to use an extension header. The time to live value still exists in an IP version 6 header, however it's called hop limit. And there is no header checksum in an IP version 6 header. Now I have opened this packet capture and I filtered by IP version 6. Now let's take a look at the field values. Okay, I will put this up at the top so you can take a look at it, and we'll go through each of those field values. There are not a lot of them, but let's take a look at the first is the version. It says version 6. Not much to see there. We know that that's what the version is, but the next field value is called traffic class. This has to do with quality of service. The default is 0, meaning best effort, and then we see the flow label. The value is 0, and that's because the flow label is experimental and not ready to be used. Now we look at the payload length. The payload length is any header or data that follows the IP header. So let's take a look at the UDP header. You can see it's 8 bytes. And the locator ID separation protocol here you can see is 76 bytes. So 76 plus 8 equals to 84. There we see UDP that follows the IP header, and that's what follow it. And then we see the hop limit. The last two field values are the source and destination address. In general, you are going to see a lot more IP version 6 on our networks, so you will need to get familiar with IP version 6. ICMP or Internet Control Message Protocol resides at the network layer of the OSI model. ICMP is an integral part of the Internet Protocol and must be implemented by every IP module as it's part of the original RFC. The fact is the Internet Protocol would be nothing without ICMP. It's a very important protocol. With ICMP, there is no data exchange, it's simply error reporting, and it's also used by the utility ping for echo request, echo reply messages. As we see here in this graphic, we can split the ICMP messages in two categories, error reporting and queries. For error reporting, you could have things such as destination unreachable, source quench, or time exceeded. For the query, you would see echo request reply, timestamp, or address mask. The ICMP message are transmitted with an IP datagram. So here we see an illustration of the IP header followed by the ICMP message. Within that ICMP message you will see some commonalities such as the type, the code, and the checksum. The content will really depend on the type and whatever possible code that you might see. IP is unreliable and does not guarantee delivery. So it's important to notify the sender when something goes wrong. ICMP is used to give feedback about network problems that are preventing packet delivery. When an ICMP error message is sent, the message is always going to have the IP header and then the first 8 bytes of the original datagram that caused the error. As we see here is an example: destination unreachable, the type, the code, checksum, and then the internet header and first 64 bytes of the original datagram. I'm at this web page ANA, and here you can see all the different types of ICMP messages. There are quite a few, but I want you to pay attention here. As you can see, there are several that have been deprecated for one reason or another, and you should avoid using them. The one that you will use and is important to use is the type 3 destination unreachable. Within that you see the different code such as the network is unreachable, the host is unreachable, or the protocol is unreachable. Let's take a look at the couple of different examples. I am at the packet life. I am going to take 2 of these packet capture, ICMP fragment, and here this traceroute MPLS. The first one I have opened is ICMP.fragmented, and in this case what we can see is this is an echo reply. So we see that it tests for reachability and is able to reach the host, and we are able to reply, yes, I did reach the host. So we see the IP header, and then within the ICMP header we see type, the code, and the checksum, and then data, which is essentially nothing. So nothing bad happens, it's just a test for reachability. Now in this example, this is a trace route. We know with trace route it purposely times out, so it's going to report back that I was able to get to this hop and then report how long it took. It comes up black because it thinks it's an error, but I will take that coloring off. But what might be fun is, let's go to the statistics and do a flow graph just to show you how it made its journey, and you can see all of those as it's going from one hop to another and then reporting back. Now because it's coming up as an error, we can see exactly what happens. As we know that if there's an error message, the message is always going to contain the IP header and then the first 8 bytes of the original datagram that caused the error to be generated. So in this case you see there's your time to live exceeded, so there's your IP header, and then we will blow out the ICMP header, and as you see the type, the code, and the checksum, and then in that you see the IP header and the first 8 bytes of the original datagram. So those are 2 examples of ICMP. ICMP is a powerful protocol, but we have to understand that it's also used in malicious ways. For example, ICMP is used in reconnaissance by Kali Linux. It could be used to do reconnaissance, to do a ping sweep, or to evade firewall rules. So the question is, what type of ICMP packet are you going to allow? The only really essential ICMP traffic is type 3. That's your destination unreachable, and then the codes that fall within that. The other are optional. The type 0, 8, and 11, those would be optional. Depend on whether you would like to allow those on your network or not. So Internet Control Message Protocol, or ICMP, is used by routers, intermediary devices, or hosts to communicate updates or error information. ICMP is essentially a code for the Internet Protocol, making sure the route is clear and communicating any error. IMP version 6, like ICMP version 4, resides at the network layer of the OSI model. ICMP version 6 is a very important protocol. It must be implemented by every IP module. Now we have said this before, but now let's take a look. We will go to the source. I am at RFC 4443, and then right here it states ICMP version 6 is an integral part of IP version 6, and the base protocol must be fully implemented by every IP version 6 node. Now just like ICMP version 4, Node data is exchanged. It used to communicate updates or error message. And it also used by the ping utility echo request, echo reply. Now here we see the IP datagram where we see the IP version 6 header followed by the ICMP version 6 message. Now that ICMP message is just like IP version 4 where you see the type, the code, the checksum and then the contents will be depend on the type and the code. But unlike ICMP version 4, ICMP version 6 has a lot bigger role. Keep in mind IP version 6 does not have any AARP or IGMP. As a result, ICMP version 6 assumes those two roles. The messages includes error message, information message, neighbor discovery message, including the neighbor discovery protocol and group membership message. That includes multicast listener discovery messages. We also, of course, have error message that includes destination, unreachable, packet too big, time exceeded, and parameter problems. The information message includes echo request and echo reply. IMET packet capture on the packet life, and you can follow along if you like. We will take two simple examples: IMCP version 6 echoes and IP version 6 NDP cap. Now I have opened up the echoes and just a test for reachability. And as you can see, we have our ping request, ping reply, pretty simple. And down below you can take a look, you have your IP header. And then your ICMP version 6 header and then the information within it. Well, now sometimes you might want to just follow what is happening there with ICMP. And if you just right click and we say follow. Well, we can't because there is no transport layer protocol. This is an SSL stream or an HTTP stream, but we can do this. Let's go to the statistics, and in flow graph you can open the flow graph and there you can see the test for reachability and with the request and the replies. And then you see the neighbor discovery protocol, and there's a lot of activity going on within this. We see the multicast listener report, neighbor solicitation and the neighbor advertisement. And again I will take a look at the statistics here and I will move to the flow graph. And here you can see the flow as the traffic is going back and forth communicating to other devices on the network. And if we did take a look at the neighbor advertisement, we will blow this out. ICMP version 6, it has some option and it is telling a little bit about what is happening. Here you see the link layer address. Here we are in the router advertisement and there are some options. I will scroll down and with this you see the link layer address or MAC address and MTU, that's 1500, and then the prefix information as well. So ICMP version 6 like ICMP version 4 is very important protocol, but unlike ICMP version 4 it assumes a couple of different roles, and that is because IP version 6 does not use AARP or IGMP, and that is taken care by ICMP version 6. Domain name systems or DNS resides at the application layer of the OSI model. The DNS is an important protocol as it maps a host name to an IP address. It uses UDP port 53 for requests and uses TCP port 53 for zone transfer. With DNS, a client will send a query to a DNS server for an IP address. The server will respond with the information. The server can ask other DNS servers for information. With DNS, there is number of types of records. Some commonly seen records are a type A record. That's for an IP address version 4 address. You might also see a mail exchange record. This will redirect mail to a mail server. A COD A. This shows the IP version 6 address. Now, why is it called COD A? Well, IP version 4 is a 32-bit address. IP version 6 has 128 bits. It's 4 times as large as an IP version 4 address. And that's why it's called a COD A. Within the DNS header, you will see questions, answers, authority resources records, and any additional resource records. Now the question from the client is slightly different from the answers from the server, and we will take a look at that in just a moment. I first want to direct you to this website, and where you can find out a lot more information about DNS. Now within this, you will see that there are a ton of RFCs that deals with different issues on DNS, such as here DNS Zone Transfer Protocol, or DNS Blacklist and Whitelist, and DNS security, and a lot more. So there is a lot more to DNS, but let's just take a look at this simple example. I am at this packet capture and there is a lot of packet. I might just want to filter by DNS, and I will just go to this display filter and type DNS. Now down below you will see that there are 12 displayed, but let's take a look at just one single transaction. I'll go here at the standard query, and when we drop this down, you see the transaction ID. Now it says down below response is 12, and it knows that because it matches that transaction ID. So I will right click and we will say apply as a filter. Now we have them together. Well, now let's take a look at the query first from the client. So using UDP, you see that it offers a high number port, and then it goes to the server on port 53 for a query. Now let's drop this down, and here we see the query, and first we see the transaction ID, and then we drop this down, and these are the flags that are set. Now first we see that the first one is a 0. That means that message is a query. Now this flag means recursion desired. Do query recursively. Now there are two types of queries, an iterative or recursive. An iterative query would be a server is unable to provide an answer, so the client has to go back out and retrieve the answer. What I would like you to do is recursive query, and that means the server will look on behalf of the client. As you can see, recursion is desired. Then down below you see I am asking one question, and please give me the IP address of this site. Now let's take a look at the response. Again, using the UDP source port 53, and then return to high number destination port, and then we will take a look at the DNS. The response, so again we see the transaction ID, so we kept those together, and then you look at your flags, and there you see your response. The message is a response, and we know that, but then down below the server answers. So as it says here, recursion desired, do query recursively, and the server response, yeah, recursion is available, the server can do that recursive query, and that's good thing. And as you can see, there is one question and 3 answers. Let's take a look at those. Here's the question to find IP address to that website, and then let's go and look at the answers, and I'll pull all these down, and as you can see here the information on all of those answers. You see that there are 3 answers. Within that you can see the time to live value is 220. Now what does that mean? In a DNS header, well, there we have a record that's returned, and you have an IP address, and you have your answer down below here. That it's saying is that the record that's going to be held in a cache on a server or even at the host is how many seconds it can live in the cache before it goes away. So the time to live value means after 220 seconds it goes away, and you will have to request that information, and it will most likely be sent back to you. So there you see a standard query and a standard response. And as we understand, DNS is a very important protocol that provides a host to IP address translation so that data can transact on the network. Dynamic host configuration protocol works at the application layer of the OSI model. The DHCP dynamically assigns IP addresses on a local area network. DHCP uses UDP for transport, and the client will use port 68 and the server will use port 67. The DHCP uses what we call the DORA process: discover, offer, request, and acknowledge. Let's take a look at the DORA process in the Wireshark. I captured this traffic after first going into my command line, and I issued an ipconfig release, and then I went back in and issued ipconfig renew. So I got rid of my IP address and then I got a new one. So when we go up here to the display filter, we are looking for the DHCP. Okay, so now let's take a look at the first one. As you can see that the DHCP release, and that means I am giving up my IP address, and you are seeing that what we give up was the .19, and now my client address is 0.0.0.0. Alright, I have gotten rid of it. But then the next step is to go through the DORA process. Now, take a look at the transaction ID. Now we know that I don't have an IP address, so the server keeps track of who I am by that transaction ID and my MAC address. So the first step is to go through the DORA process by saying discover packet will be sent out as a broadcast. Now this packet is essentially saying I need an IP address. Does anybody have an IP address? Now this goes out as a broadcast in hopes that a server will hear and respond. So as you can see that the message type is boot request. I will pull this up and I will tell you that there are a lot of different options with DHCP. But the one I want to show you with the discover packet is the request IP address. What I'm essentially saying in that original discover packet is I like the same IP address what I had before, that .19. Now we see the offer. The DHCP offer comes from a server. Now understand, on an enterprise network you most likely will see two offers responding, so it will come from two different servers. Now the offer is saying I have an IP address and you probably will like it. Why don't you try it? .19. It knows that I want the same one and it says, you know, no one's using it, go ahead, why don't you try that .19. The next step is for the client, then go back out and say, you know, I think I do want that one, and let's go to it. So I'm going to request it, and again I want that request IP address here, and I would like that IP address. Could I have it? Well, sure. So the server responds with the final step in the DORA process by sending an acknowledgement, and now I am sending my reply, and again the same transaction ID, and here we say your client IP address is .19. File transfer protocol resides at the application layer of the OSI model. FTP transfers files using TCP ports 20 and 21. Port 21 is the command channel on the FTP server, and port 20 is the secondary port used to transfer data. Once you get into the server, you are going to see a series of reply codes, and this will tell us the state of the data transfer. Classic FTP uses what's called an active request, meaning the client initiates that data transfer and the FTP server maintains state information such as current directory and any user authentication. However, most likely you are going to see a passive request, and this is preferred for clients that are behind a firewall as it's more secure because the client, not the server, initiates the transfer. Basically, the client says to the server, you sit back, I will do the driving. It first asks the server to accept a data connection over a new TCP port, and the server normally accepts the code 229, and then the server will provide a port in which to make the connection. I have this packet capture here, which is FTP, and this is standard FTP exchange of data. Now first of all, I will tell you that it's in plain text and there are very few open FTP servers out there. In most cases it's using some type of secure connection or encryption, but we will be able to see everything cause it's in plain text. So the first thing you see is the initiation of the content from the client to the server, and there you see the three-way handshake. Now I will go into the packet 4 and I will right click and I will say follow the TCP stream, and we will open this up. And this is very classic. What you see is something on there is a banner which you would read, and it would give some warnings about what the site's about and what you should or should not do. It will provide an anonymous login, and it says send your complete email address as your password. Then once you get in, the anonymous access is granted. However, restriction will apply. Now down below here we see that it is asking for the extended passive. So the client says, could we go into the extended passive mode? Then you see the response from the server 229 saying yes, we will do that, we will enter the extended passive mode, and then it replies with a set of number, and then you will see the complete exchange, and then at the end where it says transfer completed, and that kind of ends it. But let's go into that passive. So I'm going on to the frame 27 and we'll go and open this up. I'm going to go down into the passive mode. So the request command passive, so that's saying from the client to the server we go into the extended passive mode. Then the next packet is 29, where it accepts that passive request, and we will go into the FTP header where it says entering extended passive mode, and you will also see this IP address and passive extended passive port number. Hypertext Transfer Protocol is an application layer protocol for browsing the web. HTTP has been in use on the web since the early 1990s. It's a client-server model that uses TCP port 80 by default, but can use other ports as well. With a typical transaction, the client will send an HTTP request and indicate what the clients want. The server then will respond with the status code and server information and then any requested data. Now, there are several status codes within HTTP, but most of the time we are going to get a 200 or success, meaning everything's okay and the data will follow. Most application layer protocols have a typical format where you have the frame header, the network layer header, and the transport layer header, followed by the data. Now the frame header, the network layer, and the transport layer header remain pretty much the same. The data in the application layer header change according to what's happening in the conversation and whether it's from the client or from the server. So with HTTP, you could possibly get the HTTP header information that includes the general header, request and response header, or the entity header. And then within that you would have the HTTP body, which holds the HTML code or the web page so that it can rebuild that in your browser. on a local area network. The data link layer uses the MAC address of the destination machine rather than the IP address. Address Resolution Protocol resolves an IP address to a MAC address on a local area network. Let's take a look at where ARP resides in the OSI model. It resides in between layer 3 and layer 2, and that's because when we take a look at it, it does not have a network layer header. It does not have a transport layer header. It's simply doing a resolution. In addition to the ARP request, ARP replies, you might also see a gratuitous ARP, which is a test for duplicate IP addresses on a local area network. If you like to follow along, go to packetlife.net and I select ARP and this last one here, ICMP across .1q.cap. I have opened it up in Wireshark and there really aren't a lot of packet in this capture, but we will just take a look at ARP. We will just put this in the display filter. And you see there are a couple of different types. One is the gratuitous ARP, and as we talked about, that is simply a test for duplicate IP addresses on a local area network. But then down below here we see the ARP request and ARP reply. Let's take a look at the request. We'll drop this down and the hardware type is used, and here we can see it's Ethernet, and we see the protocol type IP and the hardware size, which is 6 bytes, and that is the length of the hardware address, and the protocol size is the length of the protocol address. Here we see the OP code and it is a request. Now it's from the sender here, which we can see. This is the sender MAC address and this is the sender IP address. The target MAC address is a broadcast, and remember, it does not know the MAC address, so it goes out to everyone on the network. Everyone on the network hears it, but only one should respond. And then down below here is the IP address, and then we see the reply, and it has the same fields except it does provide the answer. Now we see the opcode is a reply and the sender MAC address is a words coming from, and there is the IP address, and then it's responding to one that sent the ARP request. So address resolution protocol sites in between the network layer and the data link layer to resolve an IP address to a MAC address on a local area network. Built within the Wireshark is the expert system. The expert system helps to alert the network administrator on possible issues once a capture has been made. Keep in mind, it's only a guide. Sometimes it really isn't a problem, such as checksum incorrectly calculated. When we go into the expert info console, you will see 4 categories. I say expert info because that's how you might see it referenced. If you go into the Wireshark wiki, now they are in order of severity. The first one is an error. You will see a red circle that indicates serious problem. Yellow indicates warning. That means there's possible problems. You will probably want to look into them. Cyan are notes of interest and the blue are chats, which is typical workflow and state changes. Now I have opened up this packet capture because it's a pretty good example as it lists all 4 categories. Now if we take a look in the lower left corner, the red circle indicates the highest level of threat, that there is possible serious problem. So let's go and select that, and you can see this red, it is severity is error, because if this is red then that means that severity is error, so you have to fix this. And if I just extend this, you will see we have couple of other options like encrypted alerts, encrypted heartbeat, and we can change stuff and we can fix these stuff. Other than that, yellow you will see warnings, so the severity level in yellow is warnings. So again you can just expand this and you can just fix this stuff, and you can see all the warnings and stuff. Next one is the cyan, which is notes. You can see we have all the notes here. And the last one is blue, which is chats. And you can also change the severity level from low to high or high to low. Okay, so the expert system provides insight on possible issues in the packet capture. Wireshark groups are reporting by level of severity, and that includes error, warning, notes, and chats. Wireshark has many built-in tools to help the network administrator identify and troubleshoot network latency issues. Tools that includes the expert system, coloring rules, the intelligent scroll bar, and the time values that are built into Wireshark to identify gaps in transmission. Within the expert information, there are several things that are cause for concern. That includes zero window. That means that the client is unable to receive any more data because the buffer is full. Now on the client side, that might not be a big problem, but if it is a server, this could cause major bottlenecks. Keep alive that are saying keep this session alive, and duplicate acknowledgement, where the client is requesting the data over and over again until it receives it. Retransmission or fast retransmission, or what we call spurious transmissions. A spurious transmission is a data that is sent again even though it's already been acknowledged, and that is because the server somehow did not get that acknowledgement and it sends the data again. High latency can be caused by any number of things such as processing delays, distance itself, and something called buffer bloat. This is a queuing delay in that the router buffers get full and the packets are simply dropped, and there's a gaps in delivery of the data. Welcome guys. Right now I want to save these packets. Now there are a couple of ways we can save this packet. The first one is very simple. If you want to save the complete file, you can just simply go to files and click on save as. So you can just click this and you can name your file, okay, or you can override any other file and then simply click on save. Now what if I want to save the specific frames? Okay, let's say I want to save the frames which contain ICMP protocols. So we can use display filter, or we can also use mark. So you can see this mark packets. Okay, so first of all, let's say we want to mark something. Let's say we want to mark this one and this one. So you will see that this one is here and this one is down below. Okay, we have these two in between these two. Okay, so we can just simply go and click on mark. So it will mark this packet. And again, if I want to mark this one as well, we can just click on mark packet. And if any packet has been marked, you can again just click on and it will unmark this. So again, let's mark this as one, and you can mark all of the packet which you want to save. Okay, and another thing you can do is you can use display filter. So let's say I will just select all which have protocol ICMP. So let's just display filter this. So right now we got all the frames which have ICMP protocols, and you'll see it also have this marked one. Okay, and now if I want to save all of this, we can just simply go to file, and here you will see export specified packets. So if I just select this, now I can name my file and I can also overwrite any one of this. Let's say this new file, and after that, here you can see it contains all the packets here, and you can just select the marked packets only. So if I just select this, it will only save the marked packets, not all of these. Okay, and if I just select all packets, it is going to select all the packets. You can see we have 2 packet marked and first to last marked 2, and we also got selected packets only one. Okay, so if I only want to save the selected packet, I will just click on this. I want to save also, let's click on all packets and let's save this. Okay, and now I'll just remove this display filter and we'll close this, and again let's open the file we just created, we saved. You'll see this new file pcap, and we'll open this, and now you can see we only have all the frames which contain ICMP protocols.